Hey guys, tonight we drift into steam. Not the kind that comes off your instant ramen or the fog on your bathroom mirror, but a thicker, heavier mist that curls out of chimneys in the twilight of old Edo, clinging to the air like a soft woolen shawl. You can smell it before you see it. A mingling of smoke from firewood, damp cedar planks, and that faint mineral tang of heated well water. If you're picturing a neat little spa brochure, adjust expectations. You probably won't survive this if you assume communal bathing in Edo was anything like a modern hot tub session at a resort. The pools are hotter, the rules stricter, and the gossip louder. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you want to help me imagine how wide this little campfire of sleepy history spreads, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love to see where and when you were listening. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk the narrow lanes of Edo as the day folds into evening. Lanterns are being lit, their glow flickering against the white plaster walls of merchant shops and tea houses. The streets are still alive, fishmongers packing away their stalls, children darting underfoot, the occasional dog sniffing around, but your attention keeps wandering upward to the tall wooden chimneys. They rise like towers above the neighborhood, venting thick plumes of steam into the cooling air. It's not smoke from fires or a sign of disaster, it's the nightly heartbeat of Edo's sentō, the public bathhouses. Mainstream history tells us that by the 17th century, Edo had hundreds of these bathhouses, a density unmatched in most of the world. Bathing wasn't a luxury here. It was part of daily life. People relied on the sentō as much as we rely on corner grocery stores or morning coffee. Every evening, the chimneys belched their cloud signals, and whole districts moved in unison toward warmth and water. The quirky tidbit. Some records claim bathhouse owners competed to make their chimneys extra tall, as if neighborhood bragging rights were measured in meters of rising steam. It became a kind of unspoken advertising. Our bath is hotter, cleaner, better. Just look at how far the steam reaches into the night. Imagine strolling the city and picking your bath not from Yelp reviews, but from which chimney looked puffiest. As you wander deeper into the city, you notice how the bathhouses are not hidden away but woven right into the urban fabric. They cluster near markets, along canals, and at the edges of residential blocks. They're both practical and social hubs, where weary carpenters, busy merchants, and even samurai on leave converge. Historians still argue whether the popularity of these baths grew from religious purity traditions or simple urban necessity. Were they an extension of Shinto's love of ritual cleansing, or just the most efficient way to stop a crowded wooden city from smelling like a sock drawer? Probably both. The sensory details settle over you. The cicadas still hum in the distance, though softer now, as if even they know it's nearly bath time. The air cools, but every breath carries a hint of damp cedar smoke. You catch glimpses of painted curtains flapping at bathhouse doors, bright indigo with the family crest of the owner stitched into them. People shuffle in, carrying small bundles of towels and clean clothes. Children tug at their parents' sleeves, eager to plunge into warmth, while older men walk slower, savoring the anticipation. It feels a little like you're about to join a ritual without rehearsing the script. But there's reassurance in the repetition. Every evening, the same patterns unfold. Fires are stoked, water is boiled, steam drifts into the sky, and Edo exhales the day's fatigue. You're simply sliding into a current that has carried generations before you. By the time you reach one of these sentō, the city's din has mellowed. From inside comes a low, steady rumble. Half human voices, half the restless crackle of fire and water. You pause outside, staring at the tall chimney as the last light of day fades to indigo. It's almost hypnotic, how something as simple as heated water could become the axis around which a metropolis turns. You take a step closer, the warmth radiating faintly through the wooden walls, and prepare to push open the curtain. You linger for a moment at the curtain, that norin hanging heavy with indigo dye. It sways just slightly in the evening breeze, painted boldly with the stylized kanji that announces this place as a public bathhouse. The brush strokes seem simple, but they do the job. In a sea of narrow wooden houses, this curtain is a beacon. You notice the lantern above it glowing softly, not too bright, but enough to promise warmth inside. It flickers against the wood frame, a flame-shaped whisper telling you, yes, this is where you leave the dust of the day behind. As you edge closer, you hear the soft padding of other bathers approaching. A pair of merchants laugh about a deal struck earlier in the market. Their voices rise and fall like the rhythm of a familiar song. A young boy rushes past, clutching a tiny bundle, already slipping off his clogs in impatience. An old woman adjusts her sash, taking her time, as though every evening she rehearses the same measured steps. Mainstream history tells us that the norin curtains were not just decoration, but social markers. They signaled whether a bathhouse was open or closed, and often even marked the separate entrances for men and women once gender divisions were enforced more clearly. Some curtains were blue, some red, others bearing family crests or auspicious motifs. Passing through one wasn't just entering a building, it was crossing into a different rhythm of life. The quirky tidbit: some bathhouses are said to have displayed playful images on their curtains, fish, gourds, even humorous caricatures, so that even the illiterate could recognize the entrance. In a city where not everyone could read kanji, these images were a kind of pictorial marketing. Imagine spotting a curtain painted with a giant radish and immediately knowing, ah yes, that's the place with the hottest water. You stand at the threshold, noticing how the curtain hangs low enough that you must duck slightly, an unintentional bull. Historians still argue whether this physical motion was symbolic, forcing every bather, no matter how high or low in rank, to humble themselves before entering, or simply a practical matter of cloth length. Either way, the effect is the same. Stepping inside is both literal and figurative surrender. You leave the street world behind. Sliding through, you're met by a dim entryway. The wooden floor creaks gently underfoot, polished smooth from countless sandals. The smell changes instantly. Outside, it was fire smoke and damp summer air. Inside, it's cedar, warm dust, and the faint tang of wet stone. A clerk sits by a small counter, tallying the flow of coins, while behind him shelves of neatly folded towels wait. He looks up briefly, nods, and returns to his quiet arithmetic. Your eyes adjust to the light. The walls are simple but cared for, lined with planks that glow with the amber of oil lamps. There's no opulence here, no gilded luxury. It's practical, familiar, communal. The space hums faintly, not from chatter yet, but from the water itself, its presence radiating through the walls and floor like the pulse of some hidden heart. You pause again, still halfway between worlds, and notice the rhythm of arrivals. Some bathers move briskly as if the water is a necessary chore before bed. Others linger at the entrance, exchanging a few last words with acquaintances. Everyone is funneling through the same portal, yet each brings a different weight of the day. And for you, the curtain becomes more than just dyed cloth. It's a line in the sand, or rather in the steam. On one side lies the city with its bustle, rules, and obligations. On the other lies warmth, nakedness, and the odd democracy of hot water. You've been caught in the act of crossing that line, and it's both intimate and oddly public. You catch yourself smiling, remembering how modern gyms slap neon signs to advertise their saunas, while here it's just a scrap of fabric and a lantern. And somehow the effect is stronger. So you take a breath, touch the norin lightly as though it were a living thing, and let it brush against your shoulder as you finally pass through. Inside, the evening air disappears entirely, replaced by the enveloping hush of cedar, stone, and the low promise of water waiting. You shuffle forward into the threshold, and the first thing you notice is the floor. Rows of gaita clogs already neatly lined up like soldiers awaiting inspection. Each pair sits on a wooden slat, their teeth raised above the dust of the street. The arrangement isn't perfect. One sandal leans, another is smaller than its partner, but the effect is strangely calming. Everyone who has stepped inside has left something of themselves at the door. A faint scratching sound echoes as another bather arrives behind you. He leans down without hesitation, tugs his clogs off, and slides them neatly into the row. It's so routine you almost miss the grace of it. In Edo, shoes and dirt never cross the inner threshold. Removing them is both habit and respect, like a little bow enacted through footwear. Mainstream history notes that Geta clogs weren't just practical. They were the unofficial soundtrack of Edo. The clack of wooden teeth against stone, packed dirt, or bridge planks was everywhere. Whole neighborhoods echoed with that sharp rhythm like castanets marking the city's pulse. And every evening that music ended here, at the bathhouse door, where sandals were abandoned in orderly lines. The quirky tidbit? Some people supposedly carved lucky symbols into the underside of their geta, invisible except when removed at the bathhouse. It's a detail that always makes you wonder. Were they hoping for protection against slipping on wet floors, or just showing off secret flair like custom sneaker soles today? You imagine someone proudly revealing their sandal bottoms. Yes, mine have tiny turtles for long life. Not exactly a brag you can pull off often. You crouch down to tug off your own sandals. The boards beneath your toes feel smooth, slightly warm from the day's sun. There's a communal quiet here, punctuated only by the rustle of fabric as people untie their sashes or adjust bundles under their arms. You notice how even children copy their parents, setting down little pairs of clogs as carefully as if they were treasures. Historians still argue whether the bathhouses encouraged this neatness as part of hygiene, or if it was simply the spillover of broader Japanese custom. Either way, the message is clear. Outside, dirt belongs outside. What awaits inside is purity, however temporary. You glance around the Jenkins space, the entry vestibule. It's simple, yet purposeful. A narrow shelf along the wall holds extra wooden sandals for loan. A wicker broom leans in a corner, waiting for the attendant to sweep stray dust or fallen leaves. Above, a small charm dangles, perhaps a Shinto talisman meant to invite cleanliness and keep mischief out. For a moment, you pause, realizing you're barefoot. The floorboards are cooler here, kissed by drafts slipping under the door. The absence of shoes makes you feel lighter, but also a bit more vulnerable. You're no longer the pedestrian walking Edo's noisy streets. You're a guest, about to strip even further of what defines you outside. You glance back at the doorway curtain. The clogs remain, a little army of wooden steps frozen in mid-stride. Their owners are already inside, steam softening the edges of the day from their bodies. Yours join the ranks, humble and silent. You feel a quiet satisfaction, as if you've just placed your name on a roll call. And it's funny. You realize that in some ways the bath begins here, not in the hot water, but in the ritual of slowing down. The simple act of untying, slipping off, arranging. It breaks the rhythm of the street. One life ends at the row of sandals. Another, quieter one, begins just beyond. You take a step forward, bare feet whispering against the polished wood, and the scent of heated cedar grows stronger. The faint echo of water trickling somewhere ahead draws you on. Your clogs rest peacefully behind you, part of Edo-period nightly tide that leaves the city at the threshold to seek steam and stillness. You step further in, and the air immediately changes. The vestibule gives way to a long wooden hall, and at the far end sits a little booth raised like a bird's perch above the floor. This is the domain of the bandai, the ever-watchful bathhouse attendant. He doesn't so much sit as preside. Perched high enough to see both the men's side and the women's side, he can track every sandal that enters every coin that clinks onto his counter, and, though you suspect he won't admit it, every bit of gossip drifting upward like steam. You shuffle forward, eyes drawn to the way the booth looms over the path. It's not grand, but it's strategic, like the crow's nest on a ship. The bandai barely moves, save to nod at customers or slide their coins into a wooden tray. One glance is enough to show that nothing escapes him. He notices who enters alone, who comes in pairs, and who brings children clinging like little barnacles to their mother's robes. Mainstream fact: the bandai was more than a cashier. He was the guardian of order. In Edo, bathhouses were famously rowdy, sometimes doubling as social clubs. Without that calm, sharp-eyed presence up top, the whole place might descend into chaos. He was referee, lookout, and gossip hub rolled into one. Imagine a lifeguard crossed with your nosiest neighbor. Quirky tidbit: some records suggest attendants developed uncanny memory for sandals. Forget to pay? He'd recognize your gita and call you out before you even dipped a toe in the water. Others supposedly could tell customers apart by the sound of their footsteps alone. A skill so odd you can E.T. help but picture a talent show where the bandai sits blindfolded. Ah, yes, that's Tanaka-san. He drags his left heel slightly. Historians still argue whether the bandai role carried prestige or embarrassment. Was he respected as the invisible backbone of the bathhouse, or mocked as the nosy guy stuck up in the booth all night? Perhaps it depended on personality. You imagine some attendants relished the authority, while others secretly longed to join the chatter and warmth below instead of sweating in solitude above. As you hand over your coin, he doesn't speak much, just a nod and a gesture toward the curtain. His fingers are stained slightly darker, perhaps from years of handling coins and cedar wood. His robe is plain, but neatly tied. The power he holds isn't loud, yet undeniable. Without his approval, no one passes. You can feel his gaze lingering as you step away. It's not hostile, just all-seeing. A reminder that though the bathhouse is a place of relaxation, it is also tightly woven into Edo's web of rules. You're never completely unseen. The hall widens, and you notice how everything is arranged for efficiency. Buckets stacked neatly against the wall, extra towels folded into bundles, a faint smell of damp straw mats underfoot. But your mind keeps circling back to the bandai, that quiet sentinel above it all. It's oddly comforting to know he's there. If someone loses a comb, if two bathers argue, if a child strays too close to the scalding pools, he'll know. And though you're just passing through tonight, you can tell this man will remember your clogs tomorrow and the day after. You are now part of his mental inventory, another figure in the nightly parade. You pass under his booth's shadow, and his quiet authority fades behind you. Ahead, the real threshold awaits, the curtain leading into the steamy world of the bath itself. The muted chatter beyond beckons, promising warmth, camaraderie, and maybe even a bit of mischief the bandai will dutifully pretend not to notice. You pause before the Norin curtains, those simple cloth dividers that split the men's and women's sides. Blue on one side, red on the other, dyed with pigments that hold steady despite years of steam. They flutter just slightly with the movement of bathers slipping through, carrying on with quiet ritual. Your hand hovers at the edge of the fabric, and for a moment you wonder how many thousands of fingers have brushed these very threads. The Norin does more than separate, it signals. Blue, indigo, or sometimes navy for the men. Red or pinkish for the women. Even if you couldn't read the bold kanji scrawled across the cloth, the colors alone would tell you where to go. Mainstream fact. By the mid-Edo period, the Norin wasn't just decoration but an unspoken code. Everyone understood its meaning without needing a word. You ease through, and the world changes. The air grows warmer, thicker, heavy with the mineral tang of heated water and faint smoke from the fire below. The soundscape transforms, too. The soft splash of ladles, the trickle of water against wood, and occasional bursts of laughter muffled by steam. On the floor, you see neat rows of wooden cubbies where bathers leave their belongings. Clothes folded with care, bundles tied with thin cords. Some tuck little charms or amulets atop their clothes, perhaps hoping to ward off thieves, though honestly the bandai up above likely remembers which robe belongs to which sandals anyway. Quirky tidbit. Some Edo bathhouses had signs warning against mixing up your kimono, but there are plenty of tales about bathers walking out in the wrong outfit. Imagine trying to explain to your wife why you came home wearing a stranger's sash. You picture a sheepish laugh, a half-hearted excuse, and maybe a long night sleeping on a futon in the corner. The preparation area isn't glamorous, but it's functional. Buckets stacked against the walls, stools small enough to keep you hunched close to the ground. Soap, in the modern sense, is missing. Edo folk used rice bran or scrubbed with sand-like powders to loosen dirt. Historians still argue whether such methods were truly effective or mostly symbolic. Did Edo bathers leave squeaky clean? Or was the act of scrubbing more about ritual than results? You're left picturing someone earnestly rubbing away with a fistful of rice bran, convinced that virtue counts as much as lather. You pick up a bucket, and it's smooth to the touch from years of use, the cedar grain polished by countless hands. A ladle rests inside, waiting for you to scoop water and begin the pre-bath wash. This step is unskippable. No one plunges straight into the communal pool. First, you rinse yourself thoroughly, a small performance of courtesy. As you kneel, you can almost hear echoes of everyday life carried in by other bathers. Farmers talking about harvest struggles, merchants muttering about rising rice prices, students grumbling about memorizing Confucian texts. You're surrounded not by silence, but by fragments of the city's pulse. You pour a bucket over your shoulders, and the shock of warmth sends a shiver down your back. The sensation strips away the dust of the streets, leaving you lighter, though not yet fully immersed. Somewhere in the corner, a group of children giggles, splashing water as their parents scold gently. You imagine this scene has played out for centuries. The same laughter, the same splashes, the same weary sigh from a parent trying not to slip on wet floorboards. The preparation zone is a liminal space, neither fully public nor fully private. You are exposed, yet oddly anonymous, just one more figure in the steamy haze. It's humbling, in a way. You, the merchant, the craftsman, the samurai's retainer, all kneeling on the same worn planks, rinsing yourselves with the same water. The Norin has already stripped away a layer of individuality. Here, everyone is reduced to bare skin, bucket, and towel. And so, as you finish rinsing, you glance toward the sliding door that leads into the main bath. Steam curls outward like a beckoning hand. Beyond it lies the true heart of Edo bathing culture, the great wooden tub where everyone gathers, shoulders brushing, conversations bubbling up like the water itself. You wipe a bit of moisture from your brow, take a breath, and prepare to step through into the collective warmth waiting just ahead. You set down the bucket, and now comes the moment of pause. It's not just about water, it's about the deliberate shedding of layers. In this little changing space, you are expected to peel away the costume of daily life. The robe slides from your shoulders, the sash is untied with a whisper, and your clothes end up folded into one of those low wicker baskets lined up neatly along the wall. Think of it as the Edo version of a modern locker room attendant, minus the whistles and clipboards. You glance down at your feet, noticing the boards underfoot slick with condensation. The wood has darkened with decades of steam, and your bare toes feel the grooves carved from countless steps. A faint smell of cedar lingers. It seems even the walls and floor are infused with bathing itself. You drop the last layer into the basket and suddenly feel the collective humility of the place. Everyone is equally vulnerable here. The samurai doesn't carry his sword inside, the merchant doesn't display his coin purse, and the carpenter doesn't flaunt his tools. Instead, you all stand in the same damp air, skin glistening in the lantern light. Quirky tidbit. It is said some bathhouses displayed little signs reminding patrons to fold their clothes neatly. A messy pile might be seen as sloppy manners, and no one wanted to be that guy who wrinkled his kimono and earned the quiet side-eye of strangers. Imagine a modern equivalent. Someone leaving their jacket crumpled on the floor of a yoga studio and instantly being judged by the entire class. As you gather your small towel, you notice others doing the same. These towels aren't plush, spa-style wraps. They're tiny rectangles of cotton, practical, quick to dry, and often used more for modesty than for drying. You drape yours casually over an arm, though some drape it across the shoulder or fold it with fussy precision. Historians still argue whether Edo bathhouses were truly egalitarian spaces or subtly stratified despite appearances. Did the wealthy really bathe shoulder to shoulder with commoners, or did certain times and certain places quietly separate them? The written records are sparse, and so you imagine two parallel stories. In one, a rice merchant chuckles with a humble porter as though they were equals. In another, a subtle nod acknowledges rank even in this steam-filled democracy. You breathe in and realize just how different the atmosphere feels once you've left your clothing behind. The air clings tighter now, brushing across your bare skin, carrying heat from the pools beyond. There's a curious weightlessness to being undressed in this communal space. Not shameful, not boastful, just practical. It's as though you've stepped out of the day and into a timeless current. A man beside you ties his hair up neatly, securing it with a pin to keep the strands from falling into the water. Another pats his towel across his shoulders as if rehearsing for the warmth to come. You notice the rhythm of preparation, the folding, the tying, the small coughs in the air, and the squeak of baskets shifting on the shelves. And then, as you take up your towel and turn toward the sliding door again, you feel a strange mix of anticipation and calm. You've joined a routine that countless others have followed, night after night for generations. You've become one more figure in the steady procession of Edo's evenings, stepping out of clothes and into community. The thought is both humbling and soothing. You no longer feel like a separate individual rushing through life's errands. You're part of the nightly tide of the city, an entire capital stripping down, rinsing off, and stepping into warm water as if the stress of the day never existed. So, towel in hand, bare skin tingling in the warm haze, you slide the door open. The first wave of steam billows around your face, and the wooden tub looms just beyond, waiting like a giant carved bowl filled with the heat of fire and time. You step forward, feeling your pulse match the rhythm of the water inside. The real bath awaits. You pause just before the large pool, the steam curling around you like ghostly silk. The air is thicker here, almost tangible, and your lungs fill with heat before your skin does. Tradition whispers that you cannot simply plunge into the tub. You must first honor the ritual of cleansing. You crouch beside a row of wooden buckets, their sides stained dark from years of scalding water. The handles creak faintly as you lift one, surprisingly heavy for its size. With a steady tilt, you pour the water across your shoulders. It strikes like liquid fire, shocking you at first, but then softening into a welcome embrace. Another bucket follows, sluicing away the sweat, the dust of the street, and perhaps the stubborn residue of everyday worries. Mainstream fact. Edo bathhouses placed great importance on this preliminary washing. The pools were communal, and everyone knew that stepping in dirty would not only spoil the water, but also dishonor the shared experience. It wasn't about soap suds so much as it was about rinsing, scrubbing lightly, and showing respect. Today, Japanese bath culture still carries this practice forward, a direct echo of these Edo rituals. As you lift another bucket, you hear the rhythm of others doing the same. Splash, sigh, pause, splash. The chamber fills with a chorus of cleansing, a watery percussion that beats steadier than any drum. You glance around and notice people rubbing themselves down with those small cotton towels, twisting them tightly to scrub along the arms, chest, and back. There is something meditative about the repetition, like sharpening a blade or kneading dough. Quirky tidbit. Some Edo bathhouses were known to place a small statue of a protective deity near the washing area. Bathers could bow briefly before pouring their first bucket, a silent nod to purity and safety. Imagine if every modern gym shower had a little bronze guardian statue tucked beside the shampoo dispensers. Half sincere reverence, half quirky decoration. You pour again. The hot stream cutting through the chill that clings to your skin. This water is drawn from wells or rivers, heated in great iron cauldrons fed by crackling wood fires beneath the bathhouse. You picture unseen attendants stoking flames, adjusting vents, and making sure the temperature remains steady. Somewhere behind these walls, a man coughs into the smoke as he feeds another log into the furnace. Historians still argue whether the water was always clean or if reuse stretched the limits of hygiene. Some records suggest the pools were drained daily, others hint at longer intervals. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. High-end bathhouses priding themselves on freshness, smaller neighborhood ones stretching resources as far as they could. You run your hand along your arm, noticing how the heat has raised your skin in small, prickling bumps. The pores open, your muscles loosen, and the last chill of the evening evaporates. Your towel, now damp, hangs limply in your hand. You wring it out with a twist, droplets scattering onto the wet planks beneath you. The communal aspect of this ritual strikes you again. Alone, you might wash quickly, distracted, already thinking about the next task. Here, surrounded by strangers all going through the same deliberate motions, you are drawn into their rhythm. It slows you, calms you, turns cleansing into something ceremonial. Nearby, a boy struggles with his bucket, sloshing half of it onto the floor before it reaches his shoulder. His father laughs softly and demonstrates, steady hands guiding the arc of water just so. The boy imitates, this time succeeding, and you realize these simple actions are lessons passed down like heirlooms. Another man hums quietly as he scrubs, the sound almost lost in the splashing. It's not a song you recognize, just a low, rhythmic murmur that seems to blend with the steam itself. Perhaps it's an old work tune, perhaps nonsense, but it makes the task seem lighter, the air less heavy. You lift one final bucket, hold it a moment, then tip it in a single, decisive sweep. The hot cascade pours over you, and you breathe out with something close to relief. Your body feels ready now, cleansed not just of dust, but of hesitation. The great pool waits, steaming in its carved wooden frame. The surface shimmers like molten bronze under lantern light. You set the bucket down gently, hearing it clatter faintly, and step toward the water's edge. Beyond this moment lies the plunge, the full surrender to heat, to community, to Edo's nightly rhythm. You take a deep breath, towel tucked aside, and prepare to immerse yourself. You ease one foot into the pool, the water biting hot enough to make you gasp. For a split second, every nerve in your leg protests. But then something remarkable happens. Your skin adjusts, the pain melts, and the warmth seeps deep into muscle and bone. You sink a little further, gripping the rim of the wooden tub for balance, and soon your whole body is swallowed in liquid fire that feels strangely like comfort. The water rises to your chest. Your towel, now folded neatly and resting on your head in the classic manner, drips slowly, a comical crown of damp cotton. It is not meant for modesty here, but as a marker of etiquette. Clean towel, clean body, all is in order. Around you, the pool is alive with quiet motion, shoulders dipping, heads tilting back, mouth sighing. Mainstream fact. Edo bathhouse water was often heated to around 40 to 43 degrees Celsius, hotter than most Westerners might find comfortable. This temperature wasn't accidental. People believed the extreme heat not only cleansed but also promoted circulation and health. Even today, onsen and sentō baths in Japan keep to similar ranges, ensuring that same ouch then ah sensation persists. You shift slightly, letting the water lap at your collarbone. The warmth radiates through you, loosening tendons and drawing sweat to your forehead. The sound here is different than in the washing area. Less splashing, more gentle lapping, punctuated by the occasional satisfied grunt. It feels like sitting in a giant cauldron where the recipe calls for equal parts humanity and steam. Quirky tidbit. Edo bathhouse goers sometimes competed to see who could endure the heat longest. Men in particular would sit, stoic as stone, even as their skin flushed beet red. The first to leave might be teased, while the last remaining claimed bragging rights for toughness. Imagine turning a communal spa into an impromptu endurance contest. Your friends timing each other, joking about who will faint first. The ceiling above drips faintly, condensation falling back into the pool with tiny plinks. Lanterns glow behind screens, their light softened into amber halos. You study the other bathers, an elderly man leaning back with eyes closed, a merchant fanning himself with his towel despite being half submerged. Two youths whispering in a corner with conspiratorial grins. Historians still argue whether Edo bathhouses separated genders strictly at all times. Some accounts insist men and women bathed together without fuss, while others suggest rules fluctuated depending on neighborhood, period, or even hour of the day. Whatever the truth, the shared experience blurred lines of rank and role, merchants beside artisans, elders beside youths, all equal in the steam. You shift again, noticing how your body resists leaving the comfort zone once settled. It's hotter near the surface, cooler at the bottom, and you instinctively curl into the middle, where balance feels perfect. Across the pool, a man splashes water onto his shoulders, the drops steaming off instantly. His face breaks into a smile that could be either bliss or mild insanity. The air is thick with the earthy scent of wet wood. The walls of the tub have soaked up decades of heat, their grain polished smooth by countless elbows. You run your fingers along the rim, feeling the faint grooves where generations have steadied themselves. The bathhouse is no longer just a building. It's a living archive of human touch. Your body feels paradoxical, both heavy and light. Heavy, because the heat slows your heartbeat and melts away urgency. Light, because the water buoys you, carrying part of your weight, whispering, "Stay, don't move, you belong here." A boy lets out a sudden laugh as someone flicks water at him. Heads turn, smiles spread, but no one scolds. In this space, laughter is as acceptable as silence, both carried along in the same current. You lean back, close your eyes, and feel the steam bead on your eyelashes. For a moment, time itself loosens. Outside, the clatter of merchants and the toll of temple bells continue. But here, you float in an interval between duties, a pause carved into the day. Somewhere in the back of your mind, a scholarly whisper asks whether these baths were more than hygiene, whether they were the heartbeats of neighborhoods, the daily ritual that bound people together. Historians still argue if Edo's bathhouses functioned like community centers as much as baths. But as you sit here, melting in shared silence, you find the answer less academic and more obvious. Your muscles, now soft as dough, surrender entirely to the water's hold. Even your thoughts begin to slow, stretched thin by the heat. You tilt your head, towel still perched precariously, and sigh deeply. This, you realize, is why people came night after night. Not just for cleanliness, but for this dissolution of the day's edges. The heat holds you, steady, unrelenting, yet kind. You sink a little lower, until only your nose and eyes remain above the steaming surface. The world blurs into ripples and light. Your skin tingles as you rise slightly in the water, no longer submerged to the chin but floating with shoulders exposed, steam curling off your arms. Around you, the bath is alive with small conversations, quiet chuckles, and the occasional hiss of someone pouring fresh hot water from a kettle into the pool. This is no silent retreat. This is Edo's social living room, and you are sitting right in the middle of it. Mainstream fact: bathhouses in Edo were not just for bathing. They were places to exchange gossip, broker small deals, hear neighborhood news, and sometimes even arrange marriages. In a city packed with narrow homes and paper walls that offered little privacy, the bathhouse became the one public place where everyone could relax and talk freely. You tilt your head and listen. To your left, two merchants compare the price of rice, muttering about fluctuations that might ruin or save their fortunes. Behind you, a pair of young apprentices giggle about their master's scolding voice. And, across the way, a woman sighs about her children refusing to eat their daikon radish. Somehow, hearing these fragments makes you feel more at home, as if you've stepped into an intimate theater where everyday lives play out in steam instead of on a stage. Quirky tidbit. Some bathhouses even hired storytellers or musicians to entertain bathers. Imagine sitting half-submerged in boiling water while a man in a cotton robe strums a shamisen and sings ballads of long-ago battles. It's a strange combination, your body nearly dissolving into soup while your ears feast on epic poetry. Some Edo diarists recorded this as the highlight of their week. You glance over as a small group begins laughing louder than the rest. One man reenacts his boss's pompous gestures, hands splashing dramatically in the water, while another mimics the shrill voice of a town official. The group wheezes with laughter, cheeks flushed red from heat and humor. The steam turns their silhouettes into faint shadows, as if the bath itself were blurring the line between reality and comedy. Historians still argue whether bathhouses allowed political discussion or if such talk was frowned upon. Some suggest they were hubs of quiet dissent, where commoners could vent frustration safely. Others insist these were light-hearted spaces, not meant for plotting. Yet, considering the human tendency to talk about whatever weighs most heavily, it's hard to imagine no one ever whispered about the shogun or local taxes while their bodies simmered like dumplings. The towel on your head feels heavier now, dampened fully, sliding toward your forehead. You adjust it with a lazy hand, then notice a man beside you using his towel as a prop in a story, snapping it like a fan to punctuate each dramatic point. The crowd chuckles again, water rippling outward with each laugh. The social hum reminds you of a modern cafe, where people linger as much for company as for coffee. Here, instead of caffeine, the glue is heat and steam. Every word feels looser, more casual, perhaps because clothing and rank dissolve in the water. Samurai, merchants, artisans, all skin flushed equally pink. It's as though the bath strips away armor, literal and social. Nearby, a boy interrupts his mother mid-sentence, splashing water at her shoulder. She scolds him softly, though her lips twitch with a hidden smile. The boy shrinks down into the water, only his eyes above the surface, a tiny amphibian in training. The sound of conversation rises and falls like waves, blending with the hissing of steam and the occasional knock of wood against wood. You catch fragments, someone recalling a fire that broke out 2 streets over, another lamenting how expensive charcoal has become this winter. The topics may be local and fleeting, but the pattern feels eternal. People sharing worries, laughter, complaints, and small joys in the only venue where the heat seems to melt away their guard. You find yourself leaning back, half listening, half floating. The warmth lulls you into a dreamy state, yet the voices tether you, reminding you that this is not solitude. It is community. The bath is both furnace and forum, where bodies soften and words bubble up with equal ease. And as the conversations shift, you realize something. Tomorrow, many of these same people will return, sliding once more into this shared pool, resuming the same comfortable rhythm. For now, though, you sit among them, a stranger made familiar by steam. The steam thickens, curling above the water like slow-moving clouds. Somewhere deeper in the bathhouse, you hear the faint splash of a wooden bucket being overturned, followed by a long sigh of relief. You glance at the sliding doors. Behind them, the world of the street continues, filled with clattering gaita sandals, barking dogs, and merchants hawking their wares. But here, those sounds are muted, replaced by murmurs, laughter, and the constant, almost hypnotic sound of water. Mainstream fact: Edo bathhouses were often built with communal tubs that could fit dozens of people. The average pool might hold up to 30 bathers at once, with everyone squeezed shoulder to shoulder. There was no concept of personal space in the modern sense. Your elbows brushed strangers, and your knees touched as you sank deeper into the shared warmth. In a city of more than 1 million people, it was normal to press against others in markets, on streets, and, of course, in baths. The sensation of proximity is undeniable. You feel the subtle current of another man shifting his weight beside you, the brush of water rippling against your skin. It is not uncomfortable. Strangely, it's reassuring. The shared space forces you to accept closeness, to dissolve into the rhythm of the group. Quirky tidbit. Bathhouses were sometimes described in Edo literature as water markets, not because water was being sold, but because voices bounced around like merchants haggling over goods. In fact, certain bathhouses gained reputations for being especially lively, while others prided themselves on being more meditative. A traveler could choose, depending on mood, whether they wanted to stew in chatter or simmer in silence. You lean back against the smooth wooden wall of the tub, tracing with your eyes the blackened edges where steam has stained the timber over the years. Countless evenings, countless conversations, countless bodies have passed through here, leaving nothing but softened wood and faint whispers in the air. Across the pool, two men begin to argue good-naturedly about which theater troupe has the most talented onagata, the male actors who played female roles in kabuki. One insists passionately that Nakamura's gestures are flawless, while the other shakes his head, countering that Bando has more elegance in his step. Their hands slice the steam as if rehearsing on an invisible stage, and soon half the bathhouse is listening, nodding, chuckling, or grunting in agreement. Historians note that kabuki gossip was one of the most common topics in Edo baths. After all, kabuki was wildly popular. Its actors were celebrities, their portraits sold in woodblock prints, their scandals whispered across neighborhoods. If you wanted to know who was performing next week, or which star had quarreled with a rival, the bathhouse was as good a source as any broadsheet. A splash to your right draws your attention. A young man emerges from the water suddenly, his hair dripping and plastered against his forehead. He stretches like a cat, muscles trembling with effort, before sinking back down with a groan of satisfaction. A few others nod approvingly, as if he has just demonstrated the correct way to endure heat. The towel on your head is nearly slipping again, its damp edges tickling your temple. You steady it, noticing that others wear theirs in various ways. Some folded neatly like origami, some tied loosely like a scarf, and a few abandoned altogether, floating in the water like pale petals. The longer you sit, the more your skin prickles. The warmth, once comforting, now grows heavy, pressing down on your chest. You wonder how long others can stay submerged. Some look unbothered, chatting away with flushed faces, while others lean forward, panting slightly, their shoulders twitching in small efforts to endure. Quirky detail. Edo bathgoers often prided themselves on their ability to withstand the hottest baths. There are stories of men boasting about how long they could stay inside without fainting, their friends timing them as if it were a sport. It wasn't uncommon for one-upmanship to take place in the tub, each bather trying to prove themselves as resilient as a boiled carp refusing to soften. The air feels heavier now, the steam thicker, your breathing slower. The conversations around you blur together into a chorus of sound, rising and falling like cicadas in summer. Your body is softening, your thoughts dissolving, and for a moment you feel like one of the wooden walls, worn smooth, carrying countless echoes, steady against the heat. In this strange half-dream, the bathhouse becomes more than a place. It is an organism, the tub its heart, the steam its breath, the voices its chatter. And you, just for tonight, are part of it, another fleeting whisper among many. The world outside has faded completely, and now the bathhouse feels like the only universe you inhabit. The wooden walls lean inward, the rafters above catching droplets that fall like lazy rain, and you begin to notice how every sense is tuned to this space. The water's surface trembles with each shift of a body. The faint slap of skin against wood echoes like a heartbeat, and the warmth sinks deeper into your muscles until even your bones seem drowsy. Mainstream fact. Unlike today's bathhouses, which usually separate men and women, many Edo-period establishments were originally mixed. Both sexes entered the same rooms, sharing the same steamy pools without much thought. Foreign travelers were often shocked, some even scandalized by this openness. The shogunate itself eventually issued bans on mixed bathing in certain eras, but enforcement was inconsistent. By the late Edo period, separate hours or screens became more common, though not universal. Now, imagine this scene with the occasional woman stepping gracefully into the room, her cotton robe slipping from her shoulders, her presence stirring both silence and whispers among the men already in the pool. The steam hides most details, softening edges and blurring outlines. The air becomes charged, though the conversation continues as if nothing unusual has occurred. It is simply another evening in Edo, another reminder of how customs shift across cultures and centuries. Quirky tidbit. Some bathhouses became notorious as meeting grounds, not only for casual flirtation, but for secret affairs. Others, however, developed reputations for strict propriety, sometimes posting stern warnings at their doors. You can imagine a carved wooden sign reading something like, "Wash swiftly, soak decently, and gossip politely." Whether such rules were followed is another matter entirely. At your side, an old man with a face like a wrinkled persimmon coughs gently, splashing his towel across his shoulders. He mutters something about the water not being as hot as it used to be, and a younger man laughs, insisting the opposite, that it's hotter than yesterday. Soon, others chime in, and before long, the entire tub has split into two camps, too cool and too hot, arguing with the same energy as theater fans debating their favorite onagata. Historians still argue whether mixed bathing was tolerated more in rural areas than in urban Edo. Some records suggest countryside villages maintained co-ed baths longer, while others insist city dwellers were more nonchalant. The truth, like the steam, remains murky. What is certain is that the bathhouse served as a stage where gender norms, propriety, and the sheer practicality of daily life blurred together. You close your eyes for a moment. Behind your lids, the world swims in red and gold. Your ears sharpen, picking up the clatter of someone rinsing off with a ladle, the laughter of a group in the corner, and the drip, drip, drip of water collecting from the beams. For a fleeting second, you feel almost invisible, just another ghostly figure in the haze. And yet, the bathhouse doesn't let you drift too far. The constant murmur keeps you tethered. You overhear someone bragging about his new straw sandals woven with extra rice straw for durability. Another man complains about the rising price of miso in the market. These conversations mingle freely, overlapping and tangling until you can't tell who is speaking anymore. Quirky image. You picture the bathhouse as a kind of early newspaper, a place where news wasn't tea-printed but soaked into people as they sat sweating together. No ink, no wood blocks, just steam carrying rumors and facts alike. A sudden splash breaks the reverie. Two boys, apprentices perhaps, cannonballing into the shallows with reckless abandon. The older bathers scold them with sharp looks and grunts, though their sternness melts quickly into chuckles. Discipline is important, yes, but laughter is even more contagious. Your towel finally slips, plopping into the water with a small splash. You retrieve it sheepishly, wringing it out, only to find another man across the pool doing the exact same thing. You exchange a grin, no words needed. The steam swirls again. Thicker now, as if the room itself has decided to cloak all these fleeting interactions in memory's fog. And through it all, you float, part participant, part observer, part dreamer, trapped inside the timeless haze of Edo's public bath. The warmth clings to you as if it has decided you will never leave. Your skin hums, almost too soft for its own good, and your hair clings damply against your forehead. By now, your body has adjusted fully to the heat, and what once seemed overwhelming has become the new rhythm of your evening. The bathhouse teaches patience. It also teaches humility. Because here, stripped down to bare skin and sweat, no one looks particularly glamorous. Mainstream fact: the architecture of Edo bathhouses followed a surprisingly consistent pattern. At the entrance stood the bandai, a raised attendance booth where the keeper collected fees and kept watch. After passing through, you'd find the hiariba, the washing area with buckets and stools, and beyond that, the large communal tub known as the yubuni. Roofs often had high vents to let steam escape, though in winter the whole space still felt like stepping into a foggy cave. Quirky tidbit: attendants were sometimes known for being nosy, hovering in their booths and eavesdropping shamelessly. Because they sat elevated above the entrance, they had the best vantage point in the entire building, catching every scrap of gossip as patrons shuffled in and out. People joked that if you wanted to know everyone's business in Edo, you didn't need spies. You just needed a chatty bathhouse attendant. As you soak, you picture that attendant perched outside, tallying silently in their head. That's the rice merchant again. Third time this week. Ah, and the carpenter, still limping from last night's sake fight. And there goes the samurai with the chipped sword, trying to look fearsome in his underclothes. The notion is absurd, yet oddly comforting. Someone out there is keeping track, even if only half seriously. The heat grows so thick that your breath slows. Around you, others lean back until only their faces break the surface, eyes half shut like turtles basking. One man suddenly remembers a festival song and begins humming, low and tuneless. Gradually, a few voices join in, murmuring fragments of words until the air itself vibrates with the soft, sleepy chant. Historians still argue whether music was a regular part of the bathhouse experience, or whether these accounts are romantic exaggerations from later writers. Some insist Edo bathhouses were rowdy, filled with songs, jokes, and arguments. Others claim the atmosphere was more subdued, almost sacred in its quietness. Perhaps both were true, depending on the hour and the crowd. For you right now, it is a strange mixture. The bubbling laughter of boys still splashing near the edge, the droning song of the older patrons, the occasional barked cough from a man who has stayed too long in the steam. And in between, long silences that feel heavy enough to hear. You take a ladle of water and pour it over your shoulders. The droplets fall with a metallic sound, sharper than the muffled splashes around you. They sting for only a moment before blending into the general warmth. Somehow, that sting wakes you up enough to notice the small things again. The grain of the wooden tub beneath your fingers. The faint smell of cedar oil someone must have rubbed on their skin. The way a crack in the wall lets a single line of cool air thread its way into the room. Joke number one comes easily. If someone could bottle this bathhouse steam and sell it as perfume, they'd make a fortune in nostalgia, but probably go bankrupt after the first whiff. Joke number two surfaces as you watch a young man trying to wring out his towel so theatrically that half the water lands back on his head. Maybe Edo had its own slapstick comedians testing their material in the bath before daring to perform in a tea house. And joke number three practically writes itself when you notice two men debating whether longer soaks make you healthier or just prunier. Spoiler, they both already look like overcooked dumplings. Your mind drifts again, but this time not into sleep. It wanders sideways, imagining all the thousands of Edo residents doing the same thing at this very moment. Different districts, different tubs, yet the same steamy air, the same sigh of relief as bodies give in to the water. The bathhouse is less a place and more a rhythm, a nightly tide that pulls the whole city into its current. And so you sit there, caught in that tide, letting it carry you a little farther downstream. The water presses against you like a second skin, heavy yet forgiving. When you finally shift, rising slightly from the communal tub, you feel its reluctance to let go, clinging to your body in rivulets that glitter faintly in the lamplight. You step back toward the wooden edge, careful not to slip, and ease yourself onto one of the low stools. Steam curls upward, drifting like small ghosts toward the rafters where they vanish into the darkness. Mainstream fact: Edo bathhouses were not only for bathing, they were community centers in disguise. Merchants struck deals here, Neighbors exchanged favors, and workers recruited helpers for the next day's labor. The steamy air blurred distinctions of class, and for a brief while everyone could pretend they were equals in the same boiling pot. Quirky tidbit: some bathhouses were rumored to keep pet cats, who lounged near the warmest corners and acted like self-appointed mascots. Patrons claimed the cats could tell who would stay too long in the hot water. If the animal yawned and padded away, it was your cue to climb out before faintness set in. Whether or not that superstition was true, the thought of a furry little safety inspector watching from the corner is almost too delightful not to believe. You picture such a cat now, golden-eyed and smug, tail flicking as it surveys the scene. One man is telling an elaborate story about catching a river fish, this big, with bare hands, though his arms are stretched wide enough to suggest the fish was closer to whale-sized. Another man snorts with laughter, slapping the wet wood so hard it sprays droplets onto the storyteller's knees. The cat flicks its tail again, unimpressed. Historians still argue whether bathhouses blurred class boundaries as much as some accounts claim. While many sources insist that farmers, merchants, and samurai shared the same tubs, others suggest that subtle separations remained, by neighborhood, by time of day, or even by the quality of the water. Perhaps the myth of perfect equality was more aspiration than reality. Yet even a partial leveling was radical in a society so structured by status. As you sit there, toweling your arms absent-mindedly, you notice how fatigue has softened the conversations. The room hums like a beehive at dusk, still buzzing, but slower, calmer, less urgent. A man yawns without shame, stretching until his joints pop. A boy hiccups loudly, then giggles at his own noise. The spell of the bath seems to unravel everyone into their most human selves, stripped of roles and worries. Joke number 1 surfaces when you glance at your fingers, wrinkled like aged parchment. Maybe, you think, if scholars had just spent more time in bathhouses, they could have studied history right off their own hands. Joke number 2 arises as you imagine the local merchants trying to outdo each other in business deals while half submerged in steamy water. Buy my rice. It comes with extra soak time. And joke number 3 lands when the storyteller with the giant fish finally tries to illustrate his catch, but the only thing he manages to hold up is a soggy towel. Not quite the mythical monster he promised. The air grows thicker, and you sense the collective decision forming. It's nearly time to leave. Patrons begin to shift, standing carefully, water sloshing against their thighs. They step toward the washing area, scooping cool water over themselves in a ritual of closure. The laughter fades to murmurs, the humming quiets, and the sound of dripping replaces all else. You join them, pouring a last ladle of fresh water down your back. It shocks your skin awake, a small reminder that the world outside the bathhouse is cooler, sharper, less forgiving. Yet it feels necessary, like closing a book after a long read, the final punctuation mark at the end of an evening's chapter. You linger for just a moment longer, watching the steam rise and twist itself into shapes too fleeting to name. Then you exhale, set down your ladle, and prepare to step back into the night air. You pad softly back across the damp wooden floor, the boards creaking underfoot as the last bathers shuffle toward their baskets of clothes. The room smells faintly of cedar and wet linen, the ghost of heat lingering in your hair and clinging to your skin. Beyond the curtains, the cooler night air waits like a splash of reality you're not quite ready to meet. Mainstream fact: the origins of Edo bathhouses can be traced back to older purification rituals in Shinto shrines. Priests and devotees used water to wash away spiritual impurities before entering sacred spaces, a practice known as misogi. Over time, what began as religious cleansing gradually transformed into everyday hygiene and eventually became the foundation for communal bathing culture. You can almost see the echo of this transformation in the way patrons still pour water over their shoulders before leaving. It feels less like a rinse and more like a subtle blessing, a small carryover of ancient reverence hidden inside what looks like an ordinary gesture. Quirky tidbit: Some records claim that Edo bathhouses would occasionally offer floating herbs or fruits during festivals, not just for fragrance but as symbolic protection. The most famous example is the winter solstice yuzuyu, when whole yuzu fruits are tossed into the bath. Supposedly, the citrus scent warded off colds and evil spirits at once, though skeptics might note it mostly left everyone smelling like a fruit basket. Still, the idea of soaking in warm water with dozens of bobbing yellow orbs is an image that clings to you. Historians still argue whether communal bathing retained any true religious significance in Edo, or if it had entirely shed its sacred skin by then. Was it a spiritual continuation disguised as social habit, or had it become simply a neighborhood convenience? The debate lingers like steam, never fully condensed, always shifting. You glance around the nearly empty room. The bench is bare now except for a forgotten towel and a wicker basket. The lamplight flickers, catching in the sheen of damp walls. For a fleeting second, you imagine the bathhouse decades earlier, when perhaps a priest might have muttered a chant at the doorway, or when villagers entered the hot water with quiet solemnity instead of laughter. Joke number 1 sneaks in as you imagine a priest trying to keep a straight face while tossing yuzu into a boiling tub. May this fruit cleanse both your soul and your smell. Joke number 2 comes when you think of all those bobbing fruits and how some impatient bather might have absent-mindedly bitten one like a snack mid-soak, only to discover the bitterness. And joke number 3 arrives as you picture the spirits of old Shinto deities hovering over the bathhouse, mildly offended. We gave you a sacred purification ritual, and you turned it into a citrus hot tub party? The last embers of noise fade, and soon only the bathhouse keeper remains. You notice how methodically they tidy the space, stacking buckets, wringing out cloths, adjusting the fires for tomorrow's first heat. There's a rhythm here too, one that mirrors ritual more than mere maintenance. Even in its most mundane tasks, the bathhouse carries the echo of sacred repetition. Outside, faint sounds filter in from Edo's streets, a vendor calling, a cart rolling, a dog barking somewhere in the dark. The world spins on. Yet in this room, time feels paused, the steam a curtain drawn across history. You sense how easily daily necessity can mask ancient tradition, how quickly reverence can become routine. When you finally step out through the Norin curtain, the night greets you with a shock of cool air. You shiver, but it's not unpleasant. It feels like being reminded that you're still alive, still tethered to the rhythm of seasons and nights. Above you, the sky spreads wide, dotted with stars, the moon caught in the frame of tiled roofs. For a moment, you stand there barefoot, clothes clutched in your arms, thinking of how thousands of others once did exactly the same. The bathhouse doors close behind you with a muted thud, sealing the warmth inside. Yet in your body, the memory lingers, a glow that refuses to fade. And you realize that whether sacred or ordinary, divine or domestic, this act of bathing has stitched itself into the very fabric of Edo life. The streets outside are hushed, lanterns bobbing faintly in the night breeze, and you find yourself slowing your pace as if the warmth from the bath has seeped deep into your bones. Edo around you is winding down. The sake stalls are quieter now. The shouts of vendors turn to murmurs, and shutters are being drawn against the cool night air. The glow from your skin feels like its own little lantern, guiding you homeward. Mainstream fact: by the late Edo period, public bathhouses were an established cornerstone of urban life. Records show that there were hundreds scattered across the city, some streets hosting multiple establishments within walking distance. This density wasn't just about hygiene, it was a crucial social infrastructure, providing places for relaxation, community connection, and even informal business discussions. The bathhouse was, in many ways, Edo's equivalent of a modern cafe or community center. Quirky tidbit. Some bathhouses became so lively that musicians and storytellers would gather just outside, offering entertainment to bathers cooling down. Imagine stepping out freshly scrubbed, only to be greeted by a shamisen player serenading you while a child hands you a grilled rice snack. Not exactly the minimalist spa experience we picture today, but certainly one that made every trip memorable. Historians still argue whether Edo's bathhouses were primarily a reflection of practical necessity, too many cramped homes without private facilities, or if they represented a deliberate cultural choice to make cleanliness and sociability public virtues. Perhaps it was both. A city born of necessity, but refined into a culture of shared warmth and ritual. As you walk, you notice families emerging from bathhouses together, children wrapped in fresh cotton yukata, their hair damp and faces glowing. Young apprentices chatter about tomorrow's work, while elderly men shuffle slowly, leaning on walking sticks but smiling all the same. It feels like everyone shares in this quiet ritual, no matter their age or station. You think back on what you've seen tonight, the painted Norin curtains swaying like banners, the hiss of water on hot stones, the chatter and rising steam, and the faint citrus scent of yuzu floating on winter baths. All of it lingers in your mind like faint echoes. First joke lands as you imagine Edo entrepreneurs pitching the bathhouse to modern investors. Unlimited hot water, zero privacy, guaranteed gossip, sign me up. Second joke arrives when you consider how the gossip in those steam rooms might have been the Edo version of social media, only slower, wetter, and with fewer cat pictures. Third joke comes as you picture some scholar trying to decide if bathhouses were sacred or not, while he's awkwardly balancing on a slippery floor with soap in his eyes. Academic debates are difficult enough without losing your footing. The city grows quieter as you reach the edges of the district. You pause once more and look back toward the glow of chimneys, the faint trail of steam curling skyward as the last fires die down. That steam feels symbolic now, a thread connecting past to present, sacred to ordinary, one night to the next. The legacy of warm waters stretches forward. Even centuries later, the public bath in Japan remains a cherished institution, though modernized. And yet, the rhythm persists, shedding your day, soaking in shared heat, emerging lighter and more at ease. It is a habit stitched so tightly into daily life that it has survived urban changes, Western influence, and technological revolutions. You breathe in the night air, letting the memory of the bath deepen your calm. The warmth lingers in your chest and stomach, easing every thought into softness. You realize that though tonight has been about history, the effect is timeless. The simple human comfort of warmth, water, and company. And as you step fully into the darkened street, leaving the bathhouse behind, you carry that sense forward. The glow will fade by morning, but the story endures, echoing in the steam that has always risen over Edo.